The evening begins the way it always does. A warm glow settles across the rooftops. The last light of the day catches the edges of maple leaves and telephone wires. Somewhere in the distance, a screen door closes. A dog barks once and then falls silent. For a few moments, everything feels ordinary, familiar, the kind of evening that passes without anyone remembering it. Then, a bird lands on a wire overhead. Just one. It sits there quietly, facing west toward the fading sun. A minute later, another arrives. Then three more. They don't seem restless. They don't appear to be feeding. They simply gather. As the sky deepens from gold to amber, more starlings begin appearing from every direction. Small groups at first, then larger ones. They drift in above backyards and parking lots, over church steeples and empty ball fields, arriving with a certainty that feels almost rehearsed. Before long, the wire is crowded. The nearby trees begin to fill. The air carries a low chorus of clicks, whistles, and soft mechanical chatter. Not loud enough to draw attention, just enough to make you glance up and wonder how long they've been there. If you're new here, subscribe before you leave, because what you're about to discover may change the way you look at the evening sky forever. And the strange part is not that the birds gather, it's what happens next. Because as the light continues to fade, something shifts. The flock becomes unusually alert. Heads turn, wings twitch. Hundreds of tiny black silhouettes seem to focus on something invisible, and although no one appears to be leading them, a feeling begins to settle over the scene. The quiet certainty that every bird here knows something the rest of us do not. But that is only the beginning. You have probably seen something like this before. Maybe not with thousands of birds. Maybe not even enough to make you stop what you were doing. But just enough to leave a small question in the back of your mind. You are driving home as the sun slips below the tree line. You glance toward a grocery store parking lot, a church steeple, a stretch of power lines beside a quiet road. And there they are, dark shapes gathering where, moments earlier, there had been none. Most people keep moving. Dinner is waiting. The evening news is about to start. There are dishes to wash, dogs to walk, messages to answer. Life continues, but something about the scene stays with you. Not because it is dramatic, because it feels familiar in a way that is difficult to explain. There is a strange comfort in watching living creatures arrive from every direction and somehow end up in the same place. The feeling is subtle, easy to dismiss, yet many people describe the same reaction when they stop long enough to notice. A quiet sense that they are witnessing something important without knowing exactly why. Perhaps you have felt it too. That moment when the noise of the day begins to fade, and the world seems to slow just enough for smaller details to emerge. The rustle of leaves, the cooling air against your skin, the silhouette of birds gathering against a sky turning deep blue. And for reasons that have nothing to do with logic, you find yourself watching. Not because you understand what is happening, because something inside you wants to. But this is where things begin to grow more curious. Because the longer people watch these evening gatherings, the more they start noticing patterns that seem almost impossible to ignore. At first, it looks random. A few birds arriving from the north, a cluster drifting in from somewhere beyond the shopping center, another wave crossing above the neighborhood park. But when you watch closely, something begins to feel different. They are not simply ending their day. They are arriving with purpose. One by one, small groups merge into larger groups. Larger groups merge into something bigger still. The process repeats so consistently that after a few evenings, you start recognizing the pattern before it happens. The same stretch of sky, the same fading light, the same invisible schedule. What makes it strange is not the number of birds, it is the precision. Some arrive from half a mile away. Others travel several miles across towns, highways, rivers, and neighborhoods. Yet somehow they converge on the same destination as if responding to a signal no human can hear. Stand beneath the gathering long enough and you begin noticing details most people miss. Birds landing briefly, then leaving again. Small circles forming and dissolving. Waves of movement passing through the flock without any obvious leader. It feels less like a crowd and more like a conversation. The branches overhead become crowded with dark silhouettes. The wires sag under the weight of hundreds of tiny bodies. And still they keep coming. The remarkable thing is that very few people ever stop to ask why. We assume they are gathering to sleep. We assume the mystery ends there. But the longer researchers and observers have watched these evening arrivals, the more another possibility emerges. These birds may not simply be sharing a place. They may be sharing information. And if that is true, then what appears to be an ordinary gathering at dusk could actually be one of the most important events of their entire day. And that is where the hidden world begins to reveal itself. For a long time, scientists assumed these gatherings were mostly about safety and shelter. And certainly, those things matter. A small bird facing the uncertainty of night benefits from being surrounded by thousands of others. But as researchers spent more evenings watching these flocks, another possibility began to emerge. Some biologists proposed what became known as the information center theory. The idea is surprisingly simple. Birds that spent the day finding rich feeding areas may, without intending to, reveal useful clues to birds that were less successful. Not through language the way humans understand it, but through patterns, movement, and behavior. Whether every detail of that theory is correct remains a subject of study. Yet what observers continue to notice is difficult to ignore. Birds often arrive from vastly different locations carrying experiences from entirely different parts of the landscape. One may have spent the day near a riverbank, another near a shopping center, another beyond the edge of town. And somehow, as evening falls, those separate stories converge into a single living cloud. There is something deeply familiar about that. Humans do much the same. At the end of a long day, families gather around dinner tables. Friends meet on front porches. Neighbors pause beside fences as daylight fades. We share pieces of what we learned, pieces of where we have been, pieces of what mattered. Standing beneath the growing flock, listening to the constant exchange of whistles and clicks overhead, it becomes easier to understand why people often feel something more than curiosity. The gathering no longer feels random, it feels purposeful. Not mysterious because it lacks explanation, but mysterious because even the explanation hints at something larger. And as the last traces of orange disappear beyond the horizon, the behavior of the flock begins to change in a way that makes the entire sky seem suddenly alive. After enough evenings, something unexpected happens. You stop watching the flock as a spectacle and begin recognizing it as a presence. You notice yourself looking toward the same patch of sky before the birds arrive. You glance at the clock without thinking. You step onto the porch a few minutes earlier than usual. Not because anyone asked you to, because part of your day now feels connected to theirs. The details become strangely personal. A single bird lands on the same bare branch each evening before joining the others. A ripple of movement passes through the flock like wind crossing tall grass. The soft chatter overhead rises and falls in familiar waves. None of these moments seem important on their own, yet together, they create a rhythm, and humans are creatures of rhythm. We become attached to things that return. The morning coffee, the porch light at dusk, the sound of rain against a window. These gatherings begin to settle into that same quiet corner of memory reserved for small rituals. The remarkable thing is that the birds seem to have rituals of their own. Night after night, they arrive. Night after night, they choose the same landmarks, the same rooftops, the same trees, the same fading light. Standing beneath them, you begin to feel less like an observer and more like a witness. The distance between your world and theirs grows slightly smaller. And that is when the scene becomes most intriguing. Because just as the gathering starts to feel familiar, the behavior overhead shifts again. The chatter softens, the flock tightens. Thousands of tiny movements begin aligning into something almost impossible to describe. For a moment, it no longer looks like separate birds sharing the sky. It looks like the sky itself has decided to move. What happens next is the moment that keeps people coming back. The moment that turns casual curiosity into something deeper. The flock lifts from the trees almost all at once. Not perfectly, not mechanically, yet with a level of coordination that feels difficult to accept the first time you see it. Thousands of birds rise into the darkening sky and begin moving as though they belong to a single body. One edge bends, the rest follows. A curve forms where moments ago there was only open air. Then the shape changes again, and again. The movement is so fluid that your eyes struggle to settle on any one bird for more than a second. Scientists have spent decades studying this phenomenon. What they discovered only adds to the wonder. Each bird appears to be responding to the movements of only a handful of nearby neighbors. Yet from those simple interactions emerges something astonishingly complex. No leader, no central command, no bird directing the whole. And still the flock moves with breathtaking unity. Watching from below, it does not feel like chaos organizing itself. It feels like intelligence taking shape in the air. The sky darkens another shade. Streetlights begin flickering on. A faint breeze moves through the trees. Yet overhead, the living cloud continues its silent transformation, expanding, folding, flowing across the horizon like smoke with a memory. And perhaps that is why scenes like this leave such a lasting impression. They remind us that not everything meaningful requires a leader. Not every pattern requires a designer we can see. Sometimes order emerges from connection itself. But the most intriguing part may not be how the flock moves. It may be what humans have felt while watching it for thousands of years. Because long before science tried to understand these gatherings, people were already convinced they meant something. For as long as people have watched the evening sky, scenes like this have stirred something difficult to put into words. Long before anyone measured flight patterns or studied collective behavior, people stood beneath these gatherings and felt the same quiet sense of wonder. Many people believe that when large flocks move together with such precision, they were responding to forces hidden from ordinary sight, not necessarily supernatural, simply unseen. A change in weather, a shift in the season, a signal woven into the natural world that humans no longer noticed. Even today, something about this feels difficult to ignore. You can understand the science, you can appreciate the biology, yet standing beneath the darkening sky, watching thousands of birds move as one living shape, there remains a feeling that facts alone do not entirely capture. Perhaps it is because the scene mirrors something deeply human. We spend much of our lives searching for connection, searching for belonging, searching for the place where we fit within something larger than ourselves. And then, for a few brief minutes each evening, the sky offers a reminder that connection exists all around us, not as an idea, as a visible reality. Thousands of separate lives moving together without losing their individuality. Researchers see collective intelligence. Naturalists see remarkable behavior. Many people simply stand still and watch. Whatever name you give it, the experience often leaves the same impression. A feeling that the world may be more interconnected than it first appears. The flock continues flowing across the fading light. The shapes becoming softer now, the movements slower. And just when it seems the mystery has revealed everything it can, another change begins. One so subtle that many people never notice it at all. The transformation happens so gradually that there is no clear moment when it begins. 1 second the sky is full of motion. The next, the movement seems softer somehow, less urgent. The great shifting shapes that filled the horizon begin drawing closer together. The distance between individual birds grows harder to see. The evening air cools another degree. The last color drains from the clouds. Porch lights glow warmly across quiet neighborhoods. Somewhere a car passes on a distant road. Then even that sound fades. What remains is a feeling of stillness settling over everything at once. Standing beneath the gathering, you become aware of details that might have gone unnoticed earlier. The silhouette of bare branches against the twilight. The faint rustle of leaves overhead. The way the first stars appear one by one in the darkening blue. For a few moments, it feels as though the entire landscape is holding its breath. And perhaps that is why experiences like this stay with people long after they end. Not because they provide answers, because they create space. Space to notice. Space to reflect. Space to remember that there are rhythms unfolding around us every day that ask for nothing except our attention. The flock no longer feels separate from the evening. It feels woven into it. Like the sunset, like the wind, like the slow arrival of night itself. The need to explain everything begins to fade. What remains is appreciation. A quiet gratitude for having witnessed something so ordinary and yet so remarkable. The birds continue their gentle movement above the rooftops. The darkness deepens. And then, almost without warning, the moment everyone remembers begins to arrive. The moment when the sky suddenly seems much emptier than it did only seconds before. And then it happens. Not all at once. Not with a dramatic signal. The shapes overhead grow smaller. The movement that seemed to fill the entire sky begins folding inward. One group slips toward a stand of trees. Another disappears beyond a rooftop. Another vanishes into the deepening shadows where individual wings can no longer be seen. Within a few minutes, the sky that felt alive with motion becomes unexpectedly empty. The wires are quiet, the branches are still. The evening returns to the ordinary world it seemed to leave behind only moments ago. If you arrived now, you would never know what had just happened here. And yet, something lingers. Perhaps it is the memory of those thousands of lives moving together with such effortless coordination. Perhaps it is the realization that an event of remarkable complexity unfolds above our heads almost every evening while most of us hurry past without noticing. Or perhaps it is something even simpler. The reminder that the world is filled with patterns, connections, and quiet gatherings that do not need our attention to exist. They have been happening for generations. They will continue long after we are gone. There is something comforting about that. Something humbling. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. If you enjoy stories like this, take a moment to subscribe before you leave, because there are still countless wonders hiding in plain sight that most of us have never truly stopped to see. And perhaps that is the real mystery. Not what the birds know, but how much beauty surrounds us every day without asking to be understood. Somewhere out there tonight, beneath another fading sunset, dark shapes are gathering once again. The meeting is beginning, the sky is changing, and most people will never look up. Maybe it was only birds. But somehow, it never felt like only birds.